one of the also things that people are accusing me of that because I lurk on Twitter, I can still see shit. Is they're saying that I'm deceiving people or I'm tricking people and I'm lying and that what I'm doing is tricks. Any longtime viewer of my streams will know that at the most fundamental meat and potatoes level, everything I was telling those people is what I say on stream. Sometimes ad verbatim. Now, I wasn't talking about the esoteric details of theory because it's not relevant to that context. On the one hand, they call me overly online and terminally online, and I don't know how to talk to normal people. And on the other hand, they have this view that if I don't talk about the esoteric depths of theory and I don't fucking know, if I don't talk about sophiology and Dugin and, then that means I'm lying to them. No, it doesn't. It just means I'm talking about what's relevant to the context. And I'm also meeting them at their level, which, by the way, isn't condescending. It's just like, what do these people care about? What's relevant to them? That's where I'm meeting them. And so, no, there's no deception or trickery going on whatsoever. And by the way, everything I told them as far as the meaning of communism is concerned, a lot of people didn't notice the most important and crucial part of what I did when it comes to giving the real relevance and context to the word communism, because most communists haven't read Engels' Utopian and Scientific. Communism isn't like some society you're going to describe to them. And, oh, this is the policies we should have, or this is like the model we should have. No, communism is supposed to be the movement of the working class. So that was the most important part is like identifying the working class as like a necessary subject of politics. Okay, so that was probably the most important part as far as what was relevant about communism is concerned. And then I also talked about things that aren't even necessarily like necessary for a communist state, which is like nationalizing a lot of stuff. But I got people to come around to the idea of nationalizing not only natural resources and land, but strategic sectors of the economy. And everything I said was in line with the Chinese model. I wasn't deceiving anyone. When I said, "Oh, promote," for example, when I was like, promote small businesses and promote small entrepreneurs. What is the context of that? Okay, it's very simple. The context of that is that in a socialist system, in a modern socialist system, a post-Soviet socialist system, but you could even argue to some extent the Soviet system under Stalin. But in a socialist system, the government and public ownership kind of confines itself to things that would otherwise be monopolized by private monopolies. They don't micromanage the like small levels of the economy. That's even true for Stalin's Soviet Union, where the government did not own the kolkhozes. Were they collective forms of property? Yes, but that was in continuity with the Russian communal form of agriculture that had existed for hundreds of years, actually. It wasn't some like completely new innovation. The kolkhozes were very much a kind of standardization of the Russian peasant commune that was being eliminated gradually under capitalism. So the reason you have this collective form of agriculture in the Soviet Union is because that's the national context. That's the national and civilizational context of the Russian people. That is the form of relations that even supersedes specific modes of production, because the Russian peasant commune. Thank you so much, MJ. Appreciate you so much. The Russian peasant commune existed under the Asiatic mode of production. It existed under feudalism. It existed under serfdom, and it existed under capitalism, and it existed under socialism. So it reflects a specificity of the Russian national character that is not reducible to the specific mode of production. And the reason the communal form of agriculture didn't work in China is because it did not reflect the specificity of the Chinese traditional relations of production. So in the American context, the traditional, I guess, agrarian relations have always been based on the homestead. The homestead model is basically like family ownership of plots for use, united by as a node connected by common infrastructure. So you have this kind of like Wild West, you have these different nodes, and it's connected by common infrastructure. That's the context of what American socialism with American characteristics would look like. So no, I wasn't tricking or deceiving anyone, because what I was conveying to them was this idea that we're going to have common ownership over the things that are otherwise monopolized, like oil and energy and infrastructure, and even like the steel industry and these giant industries, probably following the state-owned enterprise model where they actually do have to compete in the market, even on an international level. But on the other hand, at the level of small, because I'm going to tell you something, the reason communism in America is so off-putting to people isn't because of this idea of common ownership. It's because of the idea of common ownership at like the minutia of life. This idea that like your toothbrush is going to be owned by the fucking government, and that like you're not going to have any ability to break out of the confines of this overwhelming bureaucracy that's going to regulate every detail and every aspect of your life. And there's going to be no room for that frontier where you go out and innovate without any prior oversight or any kind of like, that is very contrary to the American national specificity, and rightfully so, right? This idea that, we're just, everything we do is going to be bureaucratically and institutionally mediated, and there's going to be no room for the individual to step out of the fucking box and actually do things and go to unprecedented, have the freedom to like do things that are unprecedented and creative. That is very much contrary to the American national specificity. So I stand by that, not just in the context of talking to these MAGA people. I stand by that even in a very dense and intricate theoretical context. I'm not deceiving or tricking anyone. It is actually what I believe would be true for the American specificity. And what I have said about this in the past attests to as much. I've actually talked about this in the past. And so that's on record. So the goalposts have basically changed. First, what they were saying is that we would not be able to go to Trump rallies and convince Trump people to be open to this idea of MAGA communism. That's the first thing they said. Now, the second thing they're doing now, which is a complete shifting of the goalposts, is saying that, oh, but you weren't really talking about communism, Haz. That's not real communism. Okay, well, I beg to fucking differ. Yes, it is real fucking communism. Communism has always been about, first of all, it's not a form of economic voluntarism where the economic sphere is reduced to political relations of production. That's like primitive accumulation. That is not what communism is. Communism is basically, it's a force distilled in history by means of science. Communism is a force through history, and it's the force of some kind of common substance uniting a people across the relations of production. There's some kind of fundamental or common substance that is animating history. Ergo, communism is the riddle of history solved. So to put that in layman's terms, communism is just referring to the invisible social substance and common substance that glues together a society and actually unites a society. And the phenomena of communism refers to the consciousness of that substance. So communism just refers, so during the Enlightenment, we discovered, heliocentrism, and we discovered various chemical and physical processes, various natural processes. So here comes, and I'm describing to you how Marx saw it. You can disagree with me, but this is how Marx saw it. When it came to communism, which was also an extension of that Renaissance humanism legacy, where we want to gain insight and knowledge into the arts and sciences, communism was basically a kind of consciousness, an emerging consciousness of this common social substance, which has always existed, just like physical processes have always existed, just like chemical processes have always existed. But for the first time, we're having some kind of insight into that common social substance. So the utopians, basically interpreted, they developed that kind of knowledge not as not as an actual science that's tested in reality and is like delivered to actual real world practice, but kind of more in terms of like, okay, let's set up society from scratch. Let's take this common social substance and let's organize it in a very methodical and specific way to our liking and according to our passions and according to our emotions and according to our ideals. And that was the utopians. Now, Frederick Engels, when he distinguishes the idea of scientific socialism, he's basically saying scientific socialism means scientific insight into the socius, which is what Marxist class analysis is. It's a scientific insight into the relations of production and distilling that insight into some kind of practical result. And that practical result, in turn, gives us more insight. And yeah, so we just basically surrender ourselves and deliver ourselves to this process that is outside of our will, or sorry, that is prior to our consciousness and prior to our will, but which our consciousness and our will participates in. So that was what scientific socialism was about, according to Engels. So no, communism is not an ideal society. It's not some kind of way of organizing things. It's not when you just equalize society. It's not when the government owns everything. It's not even when communities own everything, like in terms of regulating every aspect of life and production. Communism, first and foremost, is the reflexive phenomena and reflexive movement of an objectively existing common social substance. That's what communism is. So I just think people don't, and I'm not saying like, oh, my version of communism has never been tried. I am telling you what communism has always been. It's been this way in Russia, it's been this way in China, it's been this way in North Korea. Everywhere communism has existed, this is what it was. So people just don't understand this because it hasn't been correctly translated into the American context, which is what I'm trying to do, which is what Infrared has always been trying to do, and which is basically where we're coming from, right? We want to translate communism into the American context. So that's what communism is. People have the wrong idea. I guess the way I would put it is that, and I've had like in-depth intellectual theoretical debates about this. Now, did I simplify it? Yeah, but I said the same thing. I didn't change my message or alter my message in any capacity. What I told those people on video is what I believe. And it's like, for example, when I said shit about promote entrepreneurship, I'll give you the context of that. So once the monopolies are crushed by means of nationalization or reparcelization, there emerges, there emerges a phenomena where from below, the state has a role in promoting some kind of up and coming form of economic development that's happening at this micro or atomic level. So in the Soviet context, that was the kolkhozes, right? Once the landowners and the nobles were the nobility who had serfs and whatever were overthrown, that which was a monopoly and all the land is nationalized, this was then the opportunity for, the common peasant to actually build, right? Build, not with the government telling them what to do, but actually take the initiative. So initiative is very important. It's not private initiative necessarily, because it's not private initiative in a technical sense, but in a colloquial sense, yeah, it's a private initiative. In a technical sense, it's not, because private property is referring to a form of alienation, and it's an abstraction rather than just referring to like something that's outside of the explicit public commons. You guys have to understand, I'm gonna say this unironically, like I am literally a Marx scholar. Not just a Marxist, I'm a Marx scholar. I have read Marx probably more than any Marxist you know of, or you've ever spoken to, or you've seen them tweet something. I know more about Marxism than them. Like, they will not be able to tell you what Marx said about crude communism or where Marx was even coming from when it comes to communism and stuff. By the way, I know we typically associate the word entrepreneur with capitalism, just colloquially, right? Because during the Cold War, there was a popularization of capitalism. And this was actually the opposite of what capitalism really was. So for a long time, capitalism was understood in terms of imperialism by like the Communist Party and by Marxists, which was basically it turned into monopoly capitalism, right? And then it's like monopoly, financialization, whatever. So capitalism existed at a very abstract level that's removed from the people. It's like at the heights of the elite, the big banks and the monopolies and yada yada yada. So during the Cold War and the post-war period, there was a new phenomena of small enterprises that emerged because of the fruits of the post-war, where from below Americans kind of had the opportunity to open up businesses and basically take on some kind of individual initiative. And then you had the phenomena of consumerism as well, which was strictly entwined with this. And this is how capitalism, quote unquote, was sold to people. They were basically told the view that, hey, the communists, they want to take away your home, because now you own homes after the post-war period, and they also want to take away your ability to start businesses, because in the post-war period, people were able to start businesses. The problem is that these small enterprises that emerge following the Cold War period, these new opportunities people have to have independent means of subsistence, home ownership, car ownership, small businesses, these do not follow capitalist relations of production. These are actually the result of an incipient information economy and an incipient socialist mode of production. That's, as Engels put it, invading from the future. So this ability for people to kind of take out loans and kind of take on these initiatives, that wasn't capitalism. That was a result of an already consolidated, like, proto-socialist system. Because it only became possible as a result of, like, this extreme level of socialization that happens in the New Deal, and which is consolidated in the Second World War, which, like, nationalized pretty much the economy to an unprecedented degree. The phenomena of incorporation, corporations, we typically think of corporations as capitalist enterprises, but they're not. For something to be incorporated means it is made into a subject of state intervention, regulation, and even planning. It's like recognized and officiated by the state as like part of the grid. It's part of the public sphere of the commons in a way. It's not really private in any strict sense of the term. A corporation can't be a form of private property, because private property, in the strictest sense of the term, is like a form of sovereignty in a way. At least as far as the industrial capitalist system that emerges in Britain is concerned. Private property is an institution legitimated by the state that the state cannot touch. It's like you are sovereign over your property. But a corporation is the opposite of that, because it's officiated by the state and it's a subject of the state. That's what a corporation is. So a lot of wacky things happen after the post-war period, where capitalism becomes redefined in in a very colloquial and relatable way to people. So capitalism becomes ideological and political rather than a mode of production. So that's important to bear in mind. Because let me just put it this way. All of the capitalism that was popular after the 1940s or 50s wasn't actually capitalism. It was a layer of opportunity and initiative that citizens of America were able to take atop a more fundamental layer of extremely heavy-handed state intervention and planning and regulation and yada yada yada. So it's completely wrong that people So the thing, when people think capitalism versus communism, they've individualized it in such a deep way. They're thinking of it in terms of like, my favorite one is like the Halloween idea. Oh, if you go trick or treating and you pool all your candy together and you distribute it into equally, that's communism. But if you keep your candy based on your individual knocking on doors and shit, that's capitalism. So people have found ways to like individualize the capitalism or communism. That's a result of Cold War propaganda. It has nothing to do with reality. That's an ideology of capitalism. But the ideology of capitalism corresponds to a socialist mode of production. When capitalism has to become an ideology, it's not a mode of production anymore.
From Schopenhauer?
Uh, Indirectly, not directly. I don't think I would say so directly. Yeah, if capitalism has to become an ideology, it's not capitalism anymore. Why? Because capitalism is an implicit set of relations of production, and it's an objective mode of production. It's not something you have to aestheticize or idealize. If you have to do that, you're not living in capitalism anymore. So, yeah, that's what you have to keep in mind. That's also why I don't mention words like capitalism, because when you mention the word capitalism, what people immediately think is, okay, how are you going to how are you going to like micromanage and regulate my life? Capitalism to me means the freedom to have initiative, to actually do things outside of the control of an institution or a bureaucracy. And that's what capitalism means to me. It means just this basic freedom, not being owned by banks and in debt and whatever. That's what they think it means, right? So that's why it's such a distraction. The socialism versus capitalism debate in the United States context was a really big downfall of the Bernie Sanders movement, because they individualized. This is my fucking problem with the whole debate that happened, which was so false, right? These modes of production, which are impersonal, scientific, objective modes of production, became ideologized and individualized, and all of a sudden people were debating, and then they became culturalized, basically. So socialism became cultural, and capitalism became cultural. If you are someone who likes to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and take individual initiative, oh, I'm more capitalistic. If you're like a pussy who's institutionalized and you're a snowflake, oh, you're more socialistic, and that's what those words came to mean. So instead of capitalism fucking meaning like the central banks and the fucking Federal Reserve and like the actual things that control our economy and the actual ruling capitalist class, which, by the way, the last vestige of capitalism that exists in America and throughout the world is in the financial institutions. They're still there. They didn't go anywhere. All the oil bankers, all those people, they're still there. The derivatives market is fucking huge. You don't know how big that shit is, right? That's where it is. Okay? It's not in it's not in this, oh, I want to take my own initiative. That's a completely moot debate. You have two peasants. This is how fucking stupid it is, right? During the Bernie Sanders movement, they culturalized capitalism and socialism. So you had this thing where the peasants are now bickering amongst each other while they're still getting fucked by the Lord, right? The Lord is still there, and you're arguing over nothing, okay? Sure, you agree to disagree about capitalism and socialism. Who gives a fuck? What about this fucking Lord that objectively is ruling over you? Now, as far as I'm concerned, capitalism is just referring to the remnants of a system that exists in the concentrated power of financial capital, which it's not something we can relate to, is what I'm trying to say. It's not relatable. When people say, "Oh, I'm a capitalist," that's a culturalization and ideologization of capitalism, which it's a distraction, and socialism has come to mean the same exact thing. So So there you go. I mean, I've always said this. To me, free market capitalism is a utopian socialist ideology. Free market capitalism is like this designed artificial system. It's this ideal society people want to have that is in contrast to real existing capitalism. And the reason I call it socialistic is because free market capitalism is a social The ideal of free market capitalism is a social ideology. It's an ideology with social implications, social ramifications, and social relevance. It's not like some acknowledgement of some Darwinian wilderness. Thank you so much, Megadafi.
I've missed the past couple streams. Do payments for the con.
Thank you so much, Megadafi. I appreciate it so much. But so when people, for example, free market libertarian capitalist ideology, now that's not referring to like some Darwinian wilderness of like, okay, I'm just acknowledging the reality. It's a dog eat dog world. Get my grind up, and I don't have time for ideology. Okay, that would be like capitalism, right? But when it's like this ideal, it's just it's no different than utopian socialism. Think about it. It's an ideal of society that is meant to solve the social crisis and ameliorate the social ills. Now, is it doing it in a way that like directly says we should socialize everything? No, but it's in a way it is saying we should socialize the economy because it has given social significance to free markets, and it's given social significance to, that type of ideal of a society. So yeah, it would be a form of socialization. It would be just as artificial as socialism or communism in order to maintain, right? So so that's what I would say to that. So the whole capitalism versus socialism thing, it's just stupid, right? Unless we're using these words to describe reality, we're wasting our fucking time. Debating about what ideal society you want to have is just a distraction from owning up to understanding the fucking society we live in today. Two peasants that are bickering about what future ideal society they'd like to have is fucking stupid, because in the society they're actually living in, they're getting fucked over by their lord. So the first and most prescient concern you should have is, how do we overthrow the lords that exist now, okay? Period. Point blank, period. So then people are asking, okay, Haz, why communism? Why do you call yourself a communist? Because I don't think communism is utopian. Because I'm a Marxist-Leninist. I've been the same. I've never fucking changed. From the start. Okay? Communism isn't a utopia. Thank you, Unknown Soldier.
But capitalism has no normative claims. Socialism, on the other hand, does.
But it depends. Are you describing capitalism descriptively or prescriptively? Thank you so much, Darg.
Great work at the rally.
The way I think about it is that I describe capitalism descriptively, and I describe socialism descriptively too, because I think socialism as a mode of production has succeeded the capitalist mode of production. It's not that I want socialism. I'm acknowledging the objective reality that there's this transformation that is either underway or has already happened. Now, you can have the debate all you want, but Marx and Engels were very clear that the socialist mode of production was something happening, whether we liked it or not. It's an evolution of history that is happening. It's even happening regardless of a proletarian dictatorship. You can postpone the proletarian revolution as long as you want, but that change in the relations of production, as Engels described with the rise of joint stock ownership and all that shit, that's happening objectively. Modes of production don't change according to the voluntary circumstances of political change. Now, does politics eventually objectively update itself to the mode of production? That's what's going on right now. Almost every useful way of understanding the political contradictions in America today can be understood in terms of the superstructure struggling to adjust itself to a new base. What we're witnessing right now with the political contradiction in America, this is MAGA communism theory, basically. What we're witnessing in America today is a contradiction between the base and the superstructure. The base has changed, and the superstructure, which belongs to the era of formalist liberalism, classical bourgeois liberalism, is no longer able to adjust to it. And that's the significance of communism. And this is quite literally at a metaphysical level as well. So, for example, the dispute in the realm of science and truth and facts that you saw with Trump's administration, where it seems like even facts are now politicized on both sides of the aisle. Let's not even be partisan. Let's just keep having an objective view right now. Well, that is in conformity with the metaphysics of a socialist mode of production. reality itself has become partisan because the era of abstract, universal, formalistic liberalism is over. Now, in formalistic liberalism, which is undialectical, human consciousness does not participate in reality. There's just an objective, cold, hard truth reality that's out there, and we don't. It doesn't. It's blind to us, basically. Well, that is the aesthetic of capitalism. That is like the metaphysics of capitalism, politically, scientifically, and whatever you want. So you've seen that rip apart after 2016 with the MAGA movement and the liberal backlash to it. So this is what's defining the internal political contradictions in America. Also, this dispute that's going on over respect for bourgeois formalism of democracy. Like on the MAGA side of things, there's a dispute, and on the liberal side of things, they're saying, "Oh, Trump is not willing to accept the results of the elections because the formal procedure of legitimating politics has come into contradiction with the actual objective reality of politics." All of these things are very telling signs of a transition, one mode of production into another, and a superstructure that is just agonizingly split over how to respond to it. And they both fail to respond to it, or at least, but it's how they fail that's what matters here. It's how they fail that matters. So, isn't Great Reset the communist solution to this contradiction? No, it's not. I'll explain to you what the Great Reset is in a second, right after this dono. Thank you so much, Chris Morlock.
Labor theory of value is not a normative claim. It's the way reality works. It's descriptive, not prescriptive. Rentier and finance has the most to lose from this. Industrial capital less so.
Ah, there you go. Well, I don't think industrial capital even exists anymore. It's all been subsumed by finance. Think about it. I mean, where do you see it independent forms of industrial capital, if not in independent sovereign states like, China, Russia, maybe even Brazil now? And even those undergo some kind of... And I think industrial capital is dead, basically, is what I would say. And I think, some respond to that with financialization and others with social. China socialized the means of production. We financialized it. But industrial capital is gone. It's out of the picture. Which is why the socialism for capitalism debate is so stupid, because we're ignoring what mode of production do we actually live in. Forget about the ideal one we'd like to live in. What is actually our society? That's where you begin. That's the square one of scientific socialism. So continuing on to what I was saying, socialism is not an ideal. It's descriptive. It's not prescriptive. So that's where I'm coming from with. So where does communism thing fit into this? MAGA communism, first of all, is about class politics. It's not about convincing people to live in your commune. That's perverted and stupid. It's not about convincing people to live in your ideal of a society. Because guess what? No two people are alike. Your ideal of a society is going to be different from my ideal of a society. How you run your fucking house is different from how I run my fucking house. You like to put your soap on the shelf. I like to put my fucking soap on the counter, right? You like to fucking you like to leave your toilet seat down. I like to leave it up. So it's like those small things, right? You know what I mean? Trying to impose your ideal of a society is just based on your personality. At that point, you're just culturalizing politics. You're not actually owning up to political realities. The truth is, if communism is real, it's a real thing, it's a real force, it actually refers to the common social substance that unites us, it's going to have to make room for the extreme variance and range of different personalities that exist in our society. So this conflict of personalities, while relevant in terms of the culture war, isn't directly relevant for politics or describing economic modes of production. If you're like a sissy lib of some kind, you're probably more likely to want to have, a safe space, institutionalized, bureaucratized mode of production. If you're, like if you're just like a fucking normal person and a dignified human being, you're probably going to want the ability to take initiative outside of bureaucracies and outside of institutions. So you have to understand what is and isn't communism, what is or isn't capitalism. It's not about ideals or visions for society. These are scientific descriptions of the society we actually live in or are not living in. So that's why MAGA communism is about class politics. It's political. All the communism thing is just acknowledging the common reality of the working class and the need for a government, aka a proletarian dictatorship in scary terms, that reflects that reality. That's what communism is. It's not a theory. It's not a project. See, that's the problem with political ideologies as people imagine them. Political compass. These are projections of what kind of society you want to live in, rather than descriptions of the ways we react to the society we live in now. So I want you guys to quote that, right? Politics is not about projecting what kind of society you want to live in. It's about how you respond to the one you live in now. That's what defines political differences. And the reason there's political differences, by the way, all of this is in my MAGA Communism Substack. The reason there's political differences is because of class antagonism, because of an underlying social contradiction that can't be represented with bourgeois formalism, which says, universal man. There's no room for contradictions there. It's all one-sided formalism.